Hey, what is up, guys? It's me, SR Mori here, and today I wanted to talk about the Batman movies, all of them, and to rank them into three different lists. My personal favorite, from the one I enjoy the least to the one I enjoy the most. The second list will be what is the best movie overall in terms of pacing and typical movie, just like as a standard movie. And then probably the most important list, which is what is, in my opinion, as someone who reads a lot of Batman comic books, what is the best Batman movie, right? Because those are all different lists, and since I made it, I might make some changes. I don't know. It just kind of some of these kind of just depend on the moment. But if you could, before I get into that, if you could like the video and subscribe, I would appreciate it. I certainly don't have enough subscribers to be getting money for this, but it still feels nice when you get the like. All right, so ranking the Batman movies from worst to best. So first and foremost, with my personal ranking, the things that I'm looking for and what I enjoy in a movie is accuracy of the character to the comics, whatever version. I mean, there's so many versions of the character even in the comics. I like suspense and I like epicness in my Batman movies. I like a lot of cool gadgets and cool vehicles with cool designs. I like my Batman movies to be dark. I don't like lighthearted Batman movies. That's just my personal preference. This is my personal ranking, so don't get angry. I mean, it's my personal ranking. Relatability. Um, there's, I think Batman's a pretty relatable character, especially to someone who's lost a parent, such as myself, in a way that was quite unpleasant and right in front of you. And so I connect to this character on a level that I wish that I couldn't, but I've always liked him even before I lost a parent. But um, since then, he has even more of a kind of a relatability connection that I kind of relate to some of the anger that he has in that realm, and because of that, I look for good villains, good performance, good acting. I like good scores. Music. I like the costumes to be really nice. Some of the costumes I don't really care for. I like the setting, Gotham and the environment to be committed to whatever it is that they're going for, and overall how the movie makes me feel. And I'm not going to be including animated movies or Batman versus Superman and any of these lists. And the reason why is because, one, it's not fair to compare animated films to live action films. And I very firmly agree with that. And the reason is with animated films, people have a lower standard for what is good quality storytelling. Most animated movies are only 90 minutes. I think if you did a live action Batman movie, or even most animated DC movies, if you were to take, say, for example, the first animated film that they did for the New 52, and you were to shot for shot, angle for angle, remake that as an animated movie, it would not do well in live action. People have different standards for live action and animated films. The only animated film that I think, if you made shot for shot, maybe not angle for angle, but shot for shot, live action, and would still hold up, would probably be Mask of the Phantasm. But it's still an unfair advantage because there are different standards. Pacing is different in animated movies. Character development is different in animated movies. Expectations are different. And it's not fair to the animated film. It's not fair to the live action film. They're different things. Also, animated films can do virtually anything without really worrying about the budget. It doesn't cost anything extra to animate the explosion versus, what it costs to actually buy the dynamite and blow it up. And then Batman vs. Superman, because it's not a Batman movie. It isn't. It has Batman in it, but it doesn't have a Batman villain in it. Batman's not the main character. He shares this probably... I think Superman and Batman probably get close to the same screen time in that movie. Batman maybe a little bit more, but it's just not a Batman movie. That being said, it is one of my absolute favorite superhero movies. if not my favorite superhero movie. I have a very, very deep personal connection with that movie in relation to losing a parent, which I won't get into now. But point is, I'm not going to include that on my list because it's not fair to BVS. It doesn't have a Batman villain. It's like if you had two boxers and one of them you pumped full of adrenaline and the other one you snapped his leg in half and said, go fight. It's not fair. BVS is working at a disadvantage in terms of Batman movie because it's not really a Batman movie. It doesn't have a single Batman villain, Rogues Gallery villain in it that I can think of. I mean, we have Doomsday, Lex Luthor, Superman. None of those are Batman villains at all. So I'm not including that. I'm not including Zack Snyder's Justice League for the same reasons. It's not a Batman movie. So first and foremost, my personal list is I don't really enjoy the kitschy stuff. So I don't really particularly enjoy the Adam West Batman. And I do want to say, I don't think any list on here is bad. I don't think any movie on this list is bad from a certain angle. Okay, so these first three movies, I don't think they're bad from a certain angle. These first three movies, if you look at them from an angle of, oh, this is a kid's movie, and they're looking to build an audience that is for kids, I think that specifically the first two, maybe not so much Batman Forever, but they're all, the Adam West Batman and Batman and Robin are really great movies if you're wanting to introduce a kid to the live-action universe of Batman. Case in point, my dad grew up watching the Adam West Batman and is a huge Batman fan even today. And he's had conversations with me where he said that, you know, when you were kids and you were watching the episode-to-episode Adam West Batman or the movie, you honestly thought that it was like serious, you know, like you knew it was goofy, but like because the actors play it serious in their goofy world, as a kid you still took it like, oh, well, how's he gonna beat him? You know, it was still had that Batman kind of like, how's he gonna beat them? Even though as an adult it's rather ridiculous. And Batman and Robin, I don't know if it was the first live action Batman movie that I saw, but it's the first one that I remember. And I remember having a birthday party when I was like 4 or 5, and I was absolutely obsessed with Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze. I had all the toys, and it was a big thing for me, and it was kind of my first real exposure to the character in live action. And you know, I watched the animated series, but that's not live action. And then, but now, as an adult, they're practically unwatchable unless you are watching them to get a good laugh. So, yeah. Batman Forever, honestly, I think Val Kilmer gets a bad rap, but I can't stand Two-Face in this movie, and Jim Carrey Riddler is both good and terrible at the same time. In both Batman and Robin and Batman Forever, Gotham itself is absolutely ridiculous. The CGI is terrible. I can enjoy these movies for what they are, but they're definitely at the bottom of the list. Like I said, I enjoy all of these movies, but I have to be in a particular mood of tolerance to enjoy these other two movies. I have to prepare myself for them. Everything in this bottom row, for me, is considered, I really enjoy them. I don't not like any of these. The reason why Batman 1989 is at the bottom of that list that I really enjoy is Batman has no arc in this movie. I do appreciate that what Michael Keaton did for the character, but he's a homicidal maniac who smiles when he's killing people. He has no arc whatsoever. I don't think that Gotham necessarily and some of the practical effects really age super well. And I've always, even as a kid, thought that Michael Keaton looked kind of goofy in the suit. His head seems kind of big and his body's kind of small. Even as a kid, I can remember thinking that. So although I really do enjoy this movie, it's Jack Nicholson that makes it so good. And, you know, so I'll watch it for Jack Nicholson. And it's not that I don't like Michael Keaton's Batman. He's just not my favorite. So next is The Dark Knight Rises. Again, I really, really, really like this movie. It's just my least favorite of that trilogy. It feels more like a Christopher Nolan movie that has Batman in it than it does a Batman movie. And it can feel kind of slow at times. And the fighting, like the fight that Batman has with Bane outside in the snow, to me is like not very well done. I don't think that the bat plane in this movie looks very good. It looks like a caterpillar that's been turned upside down. But that being said, those are my only real criticisms of the movie. I really like Bane, and I love Bale's Batman. I love how it finishes a very good trilogy. It has some very high emotional notes. I think Alfred and the conclusion of his relationship with Bruce, that scene of him at the cemetery where he's like, "Oh, I failed you, Master Bruce." Like, those are all just, it's some of the greatest Alfred, for the greatest Alfred-Batman relationship, it's in this Nolan trilogy. Next comes Batman Returns. I really, really like this movie. Specifically, Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, to me, is so not comic book accurate, but perfect. It makes a character that doesn't interest me super interesting. I don't think Catwoman, she's definitely not my favorite character. I don't like pixie cuts. The character just kind of always bored me. But Michelle Pfeiffer makes the role so creepy, and same thing with Danny DeVito. It makes the role so creepy, maybe a little too much at times, but I really like this movie. Michael Keaton still doesn't have an arc. Really at all. His Batman's just kind of there. The Tim Burton movies really are focused on the villains, but I think that's not a bad thing. I think Batman Returns is Tim Burton Unleashed. Like, this is not a very comic book accurate Batman movie, but it's like, if Tim Burton had complete control, this is what it would be, and I'm glad we got to see that. I know there was a lot of controversy around it, but I really enjoy this movie quite a lot. I try to watch it at least once a year. Next is Batman Begins, which is, honestly, these last three years, they're in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Batman Begins is the perfect Batman origin movie. The only critique I have of this movie is the pronunciation of the name Carmine Falcone. They pronounce it Falcone, and they pronounce Ra's al Ghul as Ra's al Ghul. Although I actually do prefer Ra's al Ghul's pronunciation, but it's not comic book accurate. And then Scarecrow. Scarecrow is so underutilized in this movie, and he's my favorite villain. So obviously I have a problem with that. I like the moments that Scarecrow gets in this movie, except the end where he gets tasered and goes off screaming like a little girl. It's almost like, hey, let's include Scarecrow and just do him dirty. Let's only give him like 4 scenes and just kind of do him dirty. Just make him a dumb pawn. There's like a moment where Rachel goes like, oh, he doesn't know our real plan. He just thinks we're going to hold the city for ransom or something. I'm like, you really just had to do Scarecrow dirty there. I actually think Scarecrow's better in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises than he is in this movie, and we don't even really see him for more than a scene in each. Like the opening of The Dark Knight with Scarecrow, I think is more Scarecrow than what we saw in Batman Begins. But that's my only critique of that movie. Scarecrow is my favorite villain, so it does irk me. Next is The Batman. I've already, if you want to see my thoughts on that movie, I have my review posted. My spoiler review is lengthy, but I really get into the nitty-gritty of it, and I do really enjoy this movie. But The Dark Knight, to me, is so suspenseful. Heath Ledger's Joker, I like Christian Bale's Batman voice. The suspense in this movie, the edge of your seatness of this movie. The Dark Knight, in my opinion, is the best comic book movie ever made from an objective standpoint. I personally enjoy BVS more because it has Superman and Wonder Woman in it. But if we're looking at, it's probably, it's like the Joker is better. It's both better than BVS and not. It's like personally, I enjoy BVS maybe a little bit more because of what I like. But The Dark Knight is the Batman movie that I enjoy the most. And the Batman is extremely close to that, to being number one. It's just, I personally would have liked a little bit more suspense that we have in The Dark Knight that's not in the Batman. So personally, I mean, they're really close. All right, so the next list is, what is the best objective movie with Batman in it? All right, so what I'm looking for here is storytelling, quality, pacing, cinematography, the score, character development, audience appeal, aimed for genre and how they succeed at that, acting quality, effects, digital and practical costume design. So basically, it not being comic book accurate has no weight against it. So that's kind of what affects it. So if Batman kills in the movie, which is most of them, it doesn't affect the score in this ranking. So with this, it goes Batman and Robin, Batman Forever, and then Adam West Batman. And the reason for that is, well, Batman and Robin is just horrible in every way, unless you're, viewing it as a kid. Batman Forever, it's like, hey, let's be edgy, but still kid-friendly. It doesn't, I don't know if I would necessarily show my kid that. It's not as successful in being kid-friendly. If you're going for best kid-friendly Batman, I think the Adam West Batman is the way to go. But even then, I just don't think that these age particularly well. Then comes Batman Returns. I think it's just, it goes a little too far at times. Again, I personally like it, but general audience appeal, yeah, Penguin goes a little far sometimes. I don't think that ages particularly well. And then Batman 1989, I don't think that a lot of the character designs and the score or Gotham, I don't think they particularly age very well. Like Shrek in Batman Returns, played by Christopher Walken. That character design is so odd and horrible. No. And anyway, next would be The Dark Knight Rises. Just because it's the weakest out of the trilogy, it's still an excellent movie, objectively speaking. People have pointed out several plot holes, but they don't really hold weight. They don't really hold a light to the movie, in my opinion. Next would be Batman Begins. It's a near perfect film. Score, design. I think that Bale's suit in Batman Begins is better than his suit in the other movies, personally. I think the suit in the other two movies makes him look like a bobblehead with a really small body because of the neck movement thing. I like how they fixed that in the Batman. Then comes The Batman. It's a near-perfect movie, but it does drag out a little bit here and there. But I think The Dark Knight is a perfect film. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. There's not a single critique in terms of the score is there, the acting is there, casting's there, design, everything. If we're not looking at comic book accuracy, The Dark Knight is a perfect movie. So the last list is, what is the best Batman movie? So in this, I'm looking at comic book accurate. Is it a good Batman story? Does it feel like reading a Batman comic book? Is there good character development? Is the costume accurate? All of these things. Is Batman a detective? Does he have gadgets? Does he have stealth and ninja-like stealth? Is the Bruce Batman relationship present? Is the acting good? Suspense, darkness, moral lesson, and of course, wonderful villains. That is a very important part of Batman. So here I would say I should have had these drop down one at a time, but I didn't. Um, I would say Batman Forever is the worst because there's really nothing comic book accurate about this movie except Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer is the best part of this movie. He actually does a good job being Bruce Wayne and Batman, and I do like how his serious, quiet, grim Batman kind of compares to the colorful, zany villains. But Riddler is both comic accurate and not. Two-Face is not comic book accurate at all. Robin isn't comic book accurate except his story, but I mean, he's an adult in this movie, and he's straight up annoying. The fact that you have made it to where I don't like Dick Grayson, you erred. Okay, he's a very likable character. I feel like this Robin is more like Jason Todd or Damian Wayne Robin, where you just don't really like him at first. You gotta take some time to warm up to him. Next, in terms of comic book accuracy, a good Batman movie. Batman Returns. Like the previous movie, the only thing comic book accurate in this movie is kind of Batman. With both Batman Forever and this movie, Batman kills. Now, in this movie, he kills with a smile on his face, which makes it even worse. BBS Batman kills, but he does it not with a smile on his face, almost like he regrets having to do it. This Batman is a straight-up psychopath. But Catwoman, as much as I love it, it's not at all comic book accurate, although I do really love the suit. Penguin, not at all comic book accurate. There's really not anything comic book accurate about this movie other than the basic skeleton of who Batman is, if you subtract the mass murdering. Setting people on fire, throwing them in sewers with bombs on them, you know. In Batman 1989, he's blowing up whole warehouses full of people, you know, that sort of stuff. Next is Batman and Robin. It's really just, it's a movie that tries to be somewhat comic book accurate, but it also just isn't. Like, Mr. Freeze has elements that are comic book accurate, like his origin story and everything, but how Mr. Freeze is, his mannerisms, his attitude, is not at all comic book accurate. And they're basing it off of The Heart of Ice in the animated series. I mean, that's what the whole origin, that's where Mr. Freeze's origin comes from, and it just resembles that Mr. Freeze not at all. And so that bothers me. Robin, still comic book inaccurate. Batgirl isn't, I mean, she's Alfred's daughter instead of Commissioner Gordon. She doesn't have red hair. Really, the only thing accurate about the character is her name is Barbara, and she is called Batgirl. That being said, I actually like that version of Batgirl. I actually like the suit. I like the actress. I think she's one of the good things about the movie. Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy is comic book accurate, but it's also not. Some of her motivations don't really line up with what the character, and I also, as an adult, just really don't care for the performance. It's like Mr. Freeze, where the basis of the character is accurate, but how they act is not. Gotham in this movie, not accurate to Gotham. All three of these movies don't feel anything like reading a Batman comic book. Adam West Batman is extremely comic book accurate for that era of comic books. All right? So we have to keep that in mind. But in terms of modern day comics, it doesn't hold up. So it's higher up on the list because it's accurate for that time period. But I don't read those comic books. People don't read those comic books anymore. So it's like the highest I can put it because it was relevant in the day, but it's not really anymore. Number 5, the general tone feels very Batman, but it also just kind of feels like a Nolan movie that happens to have Batman in it. But it does get brownie points for, kind of picking on the Nightfall storyline, and I do think that there's a lot of neat things. Again, like Alfred and Bruce's relationship is really well done here. I think Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne is very, very well done. Again, I like his Batman voice. It doesn't bother me. It feels like a very sophisticated Batman story that would take place in New York, not Gotham. This Gotham feels absolutely like it feels like almost even a nicer version of Chicago. It doesn't feel like Gotham whatsoever, to be honest. Next is Batman 1989. This movie saved Batman in a lot of ways, and so I give it props for that. And the Joker in this movie is the most comic book accurate Joker that we've ever had. So I give it points for that. Batman has his gadgets. There is an attempt to make Gotham look accurate. There's that in Batman Returns as well, but Joker is comic book accurate. Batman, except for the killing, is pretty accurate in this movie. And it does feel like maybe a Batman comic book from the 90s, late 80s, if Batman killed. It is largely inspired, a reaction to Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, and how that kind of revitalized the character into a dark character. This movie doesn't really borrow anything from that comic, but it kind of is following suit with that comic book and making Batman a dark character again. And so for that, I have immense respect for this movie because, in my opinion, it saved Batman from being kitsch and corny. And Batman Begins did the same thing as well, but on a lesser scale. In terms of comic book accuracy, then comes The Dark Knight. As much as I love Heath Ledger's Joker, just like Michelle Pfeiffer, I love her Catwoman, but they're not really comic book accurate. However, unlike Michelle Pfeiffer, Heath Ledger's performance as Joker was so good that it actually impacted the comic books. Joker changed in the comic books because of Heath Ledger. That cannot be understated on how impressive that is. But, Heath Ledger aside, Christian Bale does kill Two-Face in this movie. So there's the no-kill rule being broken. You can watch videos where they show when each Batman kills. All of the Batman kill except Clooney and Pattinson. So that's in every movie except the Batman and Robin. So that's something to consider. Although Batman killing Two-Face in that, I think actually is really kind of cool because Joker says, you're going to have to break your one rule. Like, it kind of just adds to the cleverness of the Joker and kind of elevates him to another level because the Joker really won in that movie, if you think about it. He proved that anybody, if having a bad enough day, can sink down to his level. Reference from The Killing Joke. And, he made Batman break his one rule, ultimately. I also have to give this movie kudos because it perfectly adapts the Long Halloween Two-Face arc. Honestly, that's why I'm not really interested in seeing Two-Face again, because The Dark Knight did it perfectly. Some people are like, well, we didn't get Two-Face long enough. Well, that's the way it is in the Long Halloween. And honestly, if you see the whole movie as Harvey Dent and Two-Face as the same person, you got plenty of Two-Face. And really, what else could you do with the character? Beyond his origin, he's really not that interesting of a villain for Batman to go up against. He's kind of like Penguin with a different shtick, right? They're both basically in charge of, like, organized crime rackets. I mean, there's not really much more to the character. It's not like Scarecrow or Joker where there's a certain gimmick that can kind of create a very interesting plot around that. So I don't know why people give that critique of Two-Face in that movie. Next would be Batman Begins because it is the perfect Batman origin story. However, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight don't really feel like reading a Batman comic book. None of these movies do. Not really, except for maybe the Adam West Batman for comic books way back in the 60s and what those were like. But the Batman, it feels like reading a Batman comic book. So much. Like it really, really does. The Batman is the best Batman movie. Batman doesn't kill. Gotham is perfectly portrayed. Bruce Wayne, that's the only critique. He doesn't really exist, but I can see what they're setting up. So I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying, well, his Bruce Wayne will be further developed. For this movie and what they were going for, it was very well executed. His Batman is in almost every scene. He is quiet, stoic. We hear his internal monologues and journals. He's a detective. He doesn't have the ninja quality that the Nolan movies have. And the Nolan movies are really the only ones that have that. But he has, in my opinion, the best Batmobile. He has some of the coolest gadgets. I wish he had a Batarang, but hopefully we'll get that in the future. So I'm not saying it's necessarily perfectly comic book accurate, but it's like the window is open for the things it's missing, and it's actually not just open, but set up to show up in the next movie. So I'm kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt there, but there really is no Batman movie that feels more like reading a Batman comic book. Riddler's appearance isn't very comic book accurate, but his personality, the way he talks, the way he moves, his mannerisms, his motivations, everything but the appearance of the character is comic book accurate. Whereas in Batman and Robin, their appearances are mostly comic book accurate, but their personalities and actions really aren't. In the Batman, the Riddler is everything you would want in the Riddler in terms of personality and how he acts. But I really can't stress enough how much this movie feels like reading a Batman comic book. Like, it really, really does. A lot of the shots are actually taken straight from comic books, and I really appreciate that. They finally nailed the detective thing. Again, I'd like to see more ninja stuff, but there are plenty of iterations of the character in comic books where he doesn't have the ninja persona a part of him. So I kind of like that they're leaving that out, but I would still like to see more stealth in that. Like Batman Begins has the best stealth takeout scene when he takes down Carmine Falcone. But if you want to see me elaborate on how the Batman is comic book accurate, you can watch my review, and I'll go into that in greater depth, kind of explaining why it's so comic book accurate. I think Batman vs. Superman keeps the mantle of best Batman fight scene, most comic book accurate Batman fight scene. That warehouse scene still takes the cake. I think that The Dark Knight maintains the rank of best villain. Batman Begins keeps the rank of best stealth scene and best origin for the character. The Batman takes the cake for best detective, best Batmobile scene, and probably I would say I like his suit the most, except for maybe Ben Affleck's suit in BVS, not Justice League. I don't like the suit in Justice League. Cowl looks weird. But that's what I think is the rankings. Let me know if you agree or disagree. You know, I'm curious to see what you think. Again, some of these change depending on the day. Sometimes I think Batman Begins is better than the Batman in terms of as a Batman movie. It just depends on really what comic book you're looking and what you think is more important for the character. Personally, I think him being a detective and being quiet and stoic is more important than the ninja aspect. So that's why I kind of put the Batman higher up, as well as Christian Bale's Batman's kind of loud and boisterous and flailing arms all the time. He doesn't really seem like a stoic figure, and Pattinson's does. So I will be ranking the Batman, the Batmen, the people who have played him, and I'll be breaking down specifically who has the best gadgets and all of that, so that I can kind of organize my thoughts on that and get that list to you as well. Maybe you care, maybe you don't. I still enjoy making the videos, so I'm going to do that. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope I see you next week for a video on me ranking the different Batmen. Peace out.